I'm Megan, 32 years old, and I've always been the reliable sister, the one who shows up. That Thursday, I arrived at my parents' colonial home in Connecticut, luggage in one hand, expensive wedding gift in the other. The next day, my only brother Jason was getting married. I couldn't contain my excitement when I saw my Aunt Patricia in the living room. "I can't wait for the ceremony tomorrow," I gushed. Patricia's face changed. "It was last week," she said, pulling out her phone. "Let me show you the photos." Before I continue the story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. If this has already got you thinking about family dynamics, hit that like button and subscribe to hear how I turn this heartbreaking moment into a life-changing realization. Growing up in our suburban Connecticut home, I always felt like I existed in Jason's shadow. Our family album tells the story better than words ever could. Photos of Jason's baseball games filled entire pages, while my academic achievements barely earned a single snapshot. It wasn't that my parents were cruel or neglectful. They just had a clear favorite, and it wasn't me. My father, Richard, was an architectural engineer who saw his younger self in Jason. Both shared a passion for building things, a natural aptitude for mathematics, and a charismatic presence that drew people in. When Jason decided to pursue computer engineering at MIT, Dad beamed with pride for weeks. My mother, Catherine, a former elementary school teacher, supported Dad's enthusiasm and added her own. She baked Jason's favorite cookies every time he came home from college, preserved his childhood bedroom like a shrine, and called him daily just to hear his voice. I, on the other hand, studied literature at Boston University. Not Ivy League, but still a respected institution. When I graduated with honors, my parents attended the ceremony, but left early to avoid traffic. That same night, they threw a surprise graduation party for Jason, who had completed his semester with merely average grades. Despite these dynamics, I continued seeking their approval. After college, I secured a position as a content strategist at a digital marketing agency in Boston. Within 4 years, I worked my way up to senior manager, overseeing a team of 12 people. My parents acknowledged my career with polite nods and occasional questions about whether I was still doing that internet writing job. Jason landed a position at a prestigious tech company in Silicon Valley right after graduation. He started as a junior developer but quickly rose through the ranks. Each promotion earned him enthusiastic celebrations from our parents. They flew across the country 3 times in 2 years just to take him to congratulatory dinners. Throughout our 20s, the pattern continued. Jason received lavish gifts for birthdays and Christmas. I received gift cards and practical items like kitchen appliances. He got calls and texts regularly. I got obligatory Sunday check-ins that rarely lasted more than 5 minutes. Despite this imbalance, I maintained a cordial relationship with my family. I visited during holidays, sent thoughtful gifts, and called regularly. I believed that persistence and love would eventually earn me equal standing in the family. When my parents decided to renovate their aging colonial home, they mentioned the project would cost more than they had anticipated. Without hesitation, I offered financial assistance. Over the course of 8 months, I contributed $20,000 from my savings toward new plumbing, electrical work, and a kitchen remodel. My parents expressed gratitude, but in the same conversations would marvel at how Jason had just purchased a new Tesla. Jason and I maintained our own relationship separate from our parents. We texted occasionally, met up when he visited the East Coast, and generally supported each other's major life events. There was affection between us, though tinged with the unspoken knowledge that he held a privileged position in our family. To his credit, Jason sometimes acknowledged the disparity, though he never actively worked to correct it. Throughout my life, I've experienced numerous instances of being forgotten or overlooked by my family. On my 21st birthday, my parents scheduled their anniversary cruise departure for the same day, assuring me we'd celebrate when they returned. They never did. When I received a significant promotion at work, my announcement at dinner was quickly overshadowed by news that Jason had been interviewed for an industry magazine. Despite these disappointments, I continued nurturing my relationship with my family. I believed that family bonds were worth preserving, regardless of imbalances. I kept showing up, kept offering support, kept loving them unconditionally. I never confronted my parents about their favoritism, fearing it would only create unnecessary tension. Instead, I built my life independently, finding validation in my career achievements and the close friendships I cultivated outside my family circle. This pattern of inequality and my acceptance of it set the stage for what would become the most painful betrayal of my life. One that would finally force me to reevaluate everything I thought I knew about family, loyalty, and self-respect. 6 months before the wedding, I received an elegant cream envelope in the mail. Inside was a beautifully designed invitation to Jason's wedding to his girlfriend of 3 years, Rebecca. The invitation specified the date, June 15th, at a picturesque vineyard in Napa Valley. I immediately called Jason to congratulate him. "I'm so happy for you," I told him, genuinely excited about his upcoming nuptials. "Thanks, sis," Jason replied. "Actually, I wanted to ask you something important. Would you be one of Rebecca's bridesmaids? She doesn't have many close female friends, and she really likes you." I was touched. Despite our complicated family dynamics, this felt like recognition of our sibling bond. "Of course. I'd be honored," I said, already mentally planning what I would wear and what gifts I would buy. "Great. Rebecca will be thrilled. We'll send you all the details about the rehearsal dinner and bridal shower soon." Over the next few weeks, I shopped extensively for the perfect bridesmaid dress, ultimately spending $800 on a designer gown in the exact shade of dusty rose that Rebecca had requested. I booked a round-trip flight from Boston to San Francisco for $1,400, reserving a rental car and hotel room for the week of the wedding. I took time off work, arranging for my team to handle ongoing projects during my absence. 2 months before the wedding, Jason called to discuss the details. "It's going to be the perfect family gathering," he assured me. "Mom and Dad are beyond excited. They've been telling everyone about their son's vineyard wedding." I shared his enthusiasm. "I can't wait to see everyone together. It's been too long since we had a family celebration." In the following weeks, I received several emails about pre-wedding events. There would be a bridal shower in early May, a bachelor and bachelorette weekend at the end of May, and the rehearsal dinner the night before the wedding. I arranged to attend the bridal shower, flying across the country for the weekend event. The bridal shower was lovely, held at an upscale restaurant in San Francisco. Rebecca seemed grateful for my presence, though I noticed she was much warmer with her college friends. My mother spent most of the event discussing wedding details with Rebecca's mother, barely acknowledging my presence. Still, I wrote it off as wedding excitement and presented Rebecca with an expensive set of crystal wine glasses that had depleted another portion of my savings. As the wedding date approached, I began receiving somewhat confusing communications about schedule changes. My mother emailed about updated plans but never specified what had changed. Jason texted about moving some things around but provided no concrete details. I tried calling for clarification several times but often reached voicemail. In retrospect, there were clear signs that something was amiss. Rebecca stopped including me in bridesmaid group texts about 3 weeks before the wedding. My mother's calls became less frequent, and when we did speak, she avoided specific mention of wedding activities. An email about final bridesmaid dress fittings went to everyone but me. I failed to notice these red flags primarily because I was immersed in a major work project. Our agency had landed a prestigious client, and as senior manager, I was overseeing the development of their entire digital marketing strategy. The weeks leading up to Jason's wedding coincided with intense deadlines, late nights at the office, and constant client communications. During this period, I missed several calls from family members. I saw notifications of voicemails and texts, but often couldn't review them until late in the evening when I was exhausted. Many messages seemed vague or routine, nothing that triggered alarm bells. A text from Jason saying, "Hope you're not working too hard," seemed like normal brotherly concern, not a veiled reference to important information I might have missed. One particular voicemail from my mother, which I only half listened to while multitasking, mentioned something about changes and hoping everyone can adjust. I mentally filed it as typical wedding flux and made a note to call her back, which I ultimately forgot to do amid project chaos. By the time my work project concluded successfully, it was Wednesday, June 14th. According to my calendar and every piece of written communication I had received, Jason's wedding was scheduled for Thursday, June 15th. I packed my bridesmaid dress and accessories, wrapped the expensive wedding gift I had purchased, and boarded an early morning flight to San Francisco. After landing, I rented a car and drove straight to my parents' Connecticut home, where family members were supposed to be gathering before departing for the Napa Valley venue the next morning. I arrived tired but excited, ready to celebrate my brother's special day and fulfill my role as bridesmaid. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed fewer cars than I expected. The house didn't have the bustling pre-wedding energy I had anticipated. Still, I gathered my luggage and gift, approached the front door with a smile, and walked into what would become the most painful moment of my adult life. The living room had that peculiar stillness of an ordinary Thursday afternoon. Mom was reading a magazine in her favorite armchair. Dad was tinkering with his model train set in the corner. Aunt Patricia sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone. They all looked up when I entered, expressions shifting from surprise to something more complex. "Megan," Mom exclaimed, setting down her magazine. "What are you doing here?" I laughed, assuming she was joking. "What do you mean?" "I'm here for Jason's wedding tomorrow." "Where is everyone else? Where's Jason and Rebecca?" A strange silence fell over the room. My father cleared his throat and became suddenly engrossed in a tiny plastic tree for his train layout. Aunt Patricia looked uncomfortably at my mother, who was now fidgeting with her reading glasses. "Honey," my mother finally said, her voice gentle but awkward. "The wedding date was changed. It happened last weekend." The words didn't register immediately. I stood there, still holding my suitcase handle in one hand and the carefully wrapped crystal decanter set in the other. "What do you mean?" I asked, a nervous laugh escaping me. "That's not possible. I have the invitation right here." I fumbled to pull it from my purse, dropping my car keys in the process. Aunt Patricia stood up. "Let me show you," she said, walking toward me with her phone extended. It was beautiful. "Here are the photos." I stared at her screen as she swiped through dozens of images. There was Jason in a black tuxedo, beaming beside a radiant Rebecca in a lace gown. There were my parents, dressed impeccably, giving toasts and dancing. Extended family members I rarely saw were all present, smiling and celebrating. Every significant person in my family's life was captured in these photos. Everyone except me. "This can't be right," I whispered, my throat constricting. I was supposed to be a bridesmaid. I bought a dress. I took time off work. My father finally looked up from his train set. "We tried to tell you, Megan. Jason said he called you several times about the date change." My hands trembled as I pulled out my phone and frantically searched through my call history, texts, and emails. There were indeed missed calls from Jason, but no voicemails explicitly mentioning a date change. A few texts referenced updates and changes, but nothing clearly stating the wedding had been moved up by a week. Why didn't anyone make sure I knew? My voice cracked. This was my brother's wedding. I'm his only sister. My mother sighed. "You've been so busy with work lately. Always saying you can't talk or you'll call back later. We assumed when you didn't respond to the updated invitations that you were just too caught up in your job to attend." "Updated invitations?" I echoed. "I never received any updated invitation. We sent them by email," my father said. "It was too late for paper ones." I checked my email again, including spam and trash folders. Nothing. Just then, the front door opened, and Jason walked in, followed by Rebecca. They froze when they saw me. "Megan." Jason looked genuinely shocked. "What are you doing here?" The room spun around me. "I came for your wedding," I said weakly. "The one that was supposed to be tomorrow." Jason and Rebecca exchanged glances. "The date was changed months ago," Rebecca said slowly. "We sent out notices to everyone." "I never got a notice," I insisted. No one called to specifically tell me the wedding had been moved up a week. An uncomfortable silence filled the room before Jason let out a small laugh. Didn't we tell you? I could have sworn I left you a voicemail. Rebecca nudged him. Remember? You said you couldn't reach her directly because she was in that big meeting. You were going to try again later. Right, Jason nodded. But then things got so hectic with the venue change and everything. My parents were now watching this exchange with slight smiles, as if this were simply an amusing miscommunication rather than a devastating exclusion. So no one thought to make absolutely sure that I knew about my only brother's wedding date change? I asked, my voice surprisingly steady despite the storm raging inside me. No one thought it was strange that I, who was supposed to be a bridesmaid, didn't respond to confirm the new date? We figured you were just too busy, my mother repeated. You know how you get with your work projects? Sometimes we don't hear from you for weeks. Aunt Patricia was still swiping through wedding photos, seemingly oblivious to the tension. Look at this one of Jason dancing with your mom. Isn't it precious? My father chuckled. Megan, you've always been the absent-minded one in the family. Remember when you missed your cousin's graduation because you had the date wrong? That had happened once, 12 years ago, when I was 20. I had never lived it down. And now you've missed my wedding, Jason said, his tone a mixture of amusement and mild reproach. Classic Megan. They were all looking at me now, their expressions expectant. They were waiting for me to laugh it off, to accept my role as the family scatterbrain, to apologize for my supposed oversight. Instead, I felt something crack inside me. A lifetime of being secondary, of bending over backward to please them while receiving scraps of attention in return, culminated in this moment of utter betrayal. They hadn't just forgotten to include me, they had collectively decided I wasn't important enough to ensure I was present for one of the most significant family events of our lives. I see, I said quietly, setting down the wedding gift on the coffee table. Congratulations on your wedding. The gift is Waterford crystal. I hope you enjoy it. I turned and walked out the door, leaving my suitcase behind, ignoring their calls for me to come back and not be so sensitive. In my car, hands shaking on the steering wheel, I realized a fundamental truth. This wasn't a miscommunication. It was the culmination of a lifetime of being valued less. I drove aimlessly for nearly an hour, tears blurring my vision, before finally pulling into a Holiday Inn parking lot. Inside my rental car, I allowed myself to break down completely. Gut-wrenching sobs tore through me as the full weight of what had happened settled in my chest like concrete. The hotel room I eventually checked into was generic and impersonal, which suited my state of mind perfectly. I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floral artwork on the wall without really seeing it. My phone buzzed repeatedly with texts from my mother asking where I'd gone and why I was overreacting. I silenced it and placed it face down on the nightstand. Around midnight, when the worst of the shock had subsided, I picked up my phone again. There were 7 missed calls from my mother, 3 from my father, and 1 from Jason. Numerous texts expressed confusion about my dramatic exit and urged me to come back to the house so we could talk about this misunderstanding. Not one message contained a genuine apology. With trembling fingers, I scrolled back through weeks of communications, searching for evidence of this supposed wedding date change notification. What I found instead was a pattern of deliberate vagueness. Messages like, "Hope you're keeping up with the wedding updates," and "Things are changing quickly with the plans," never explicitly stated the critical information that the entire event had been moved up by a week. In one particularly telling exchange 3 weeks earlier, I had texted Jason confirming I'd be arriving on June 14th for the June 15th wedding. His response read simply, "Sounds good, see you then." Not once did he mention that by June 14th, he would already be a married man. I switched to my email, meticulously combing through every folder. There was no updated invitation, as my father had claimed. The closest thing was a message from Rebecca about some scheduling adjustments that contained no specifics and directed recipients to check the wedding website for details. When I visited that website now, it indeed showed the updated date, but no one had ever told me to check it for critical changes. It was nearly 2 in the morning when I finally called Amber, my best friend since college. Despite the hour, she answered on the third ring. Meg? What's wrong? Her voice was thick with sleep, but instantly concerned. I tried to explain what had happened, but fresh tears made it difficult to speak coherently. They had the wedding without me, I finally managed. Last weekend. They all knew I wasn't there, and they did it anyway. What? Amber was fully awake now. How's that possible? You were supposed to be a bridesmaid. Apparently, they changed the date and claimed they told me, but none of them actually made sure I knew. I pulled a tissue from the hotel room box. I have all these missed calls and vague messages, but not one clear communication saying, "Hey, Megan. The wedding is now on June 8th instead of June 15th. That's not a miscommunication, Amber said firmly. That's exclusion. Exactly. Hearing someone else validate my perception was like a life raft in stormy seas. The worst part is, they're acting like it's my fault. Like I'm just absent-minded Megan who couldn't be bothered to keep track of her only brother's wedding. That's gaslighting, Amber replied. They're trying to make you question your own reality. We talked for over an hour, Amber listening as I recounted not just this incident, but the pattern of being secondary in my family that had persisted throughout my life. She had witnessed much of it firsthand during college when my parents would visit campus primarily to see Jason at MIT and only stop by Boston University as an afterthought. What are you going to do now? She asked finally. I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to confront them, demand they acknowledge what they did. But another part just wants to cut them off entirely. Whatever you decide, I'm here for you, Amber assured me. But Meg, please remember that how they treat you isn't a reflection of your worth. It's a reflection of their limitations. After we hung up, I opened Instagram, a decision I immediately regretted. My feed was flooded with wedding photos that family members and guests had posted over the past week. Carefully curated images showed my parents beaming beside Jason, extended family members I hadn't seen in years posing together, cousins I thought I was close to giving toasts and dancing. Comments beneath these photos praised the beautiful family celebration and the perfect family weekend. My aunt had posted a group shot with the caption, "Complete family gathering for Jason's special day." The irony was almost too much to bear. I navigated to Jason's profile and found a professional photo of him with our parents, all three glowing with happiness. The caption read, "Couldn't have asked for a more perfect day with the people who matter most." The people who matter most. A phrase that evidently excluded his only sister. I closed the app and lay back on the hotel bed, exhaustion finally overtaking the adrenaline of anger and hurt. As I drifted toward uneasy sleep, I tried calling Jason one last time. The call went straight to voicemail. I didn't leave a message. What could I possibly say that would make him understand the depth of this betrayal? Morning brought no relief. I woke with swollen eyes and a hollowness in my chest that felt permanent. Checking out of the hotel, I decided to drive straight to the airport and take the first available flight back to Boston. There was nothing left for me here in Connecticut, no conversation that could undo what had been done. As I waited at the gate for my flight, I made a decision. This would not be like all the other times I had swallowed my hurt and carried on pretending everything was fine. This time, I would value myself enough to acknowledge the truth. My family had excluded me intentionally, and I deserved better than to accept their gaslighting explanations. This realization didn't diminish the pain, but it did something equally important. It awakened in me a resolve I had never felt before, a determination to stop accepting scraps of regard from people who should have treasured me from the beginning. Back in my Boston apartment, I spent the weekend in a state of emotional numbness. I moved through the motions of daily life, watering my plants, answering essential work emails, ordering delivery food that I barely touched. By Monday morning, the shock had begun to crystallize into something harder and more defined, a clarity I had never allowed myself before. Sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of cooling coffee, I opened my financial records and reviewed the payments I had made toward my parents' home renovation. $20,000 over 8 months. Money I had originally saved for a down payment on my own place. I had transferred these funds without hesitation, believing that supporting my family was worth delaying my own goals. Now, Those transactions stared back at me from my laptop screen, each one a testament to my one-sided commitment to a family that had just demonstrated how little they valued me in return. The renovation project wasn't complete yet. According to the last update from my mother, they still needed to finish the kitchen and master bathroom. Work that would require another $15,000, which I had already verbally committed to providing. For the first time, I questioned whether I should follow through on that commitment. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was my boss, checking to see if I was coming into the office after my family wedding weekend. The irony wasn't lost on me. Actually, Caroline. I need to take a personal day, I said. Some family issues have come up. Of course, she replied, her tone sympathetic. Take whatever time you need. The Hartman project is in good shape thanks to all your extra hours these past few weeks. After hanging up, I made another call, this one to a therapist whose card Amber had given me months ago, urging me to address what she called my family-shaped wound. I had dismissed her concern then. Now, I secured the first available appointment. Dr. Lillian Foster's office was a calm space of muted blues and soft lighting. The therapist herself, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a direct manner, listened without interruption as I recounted what had happened with Jason's wedding and the lifetime of similar incidents that preceded it. What you're describing, she said when I finally fell silent, is a family system that has consistently placed you in a specific role, what family therapists sometimes call the less favored child. This isn't uncommon. But it is damaging, especially when the family collectively gaslights you about their behavior. So I'm not overreacting? I asked, still seeking validation despite the mountain of evidence. Megan. Dr. Foster leaned forward slightly. Missing your brother's wedding due to a deliberate failure to properly inform you is not a small oversight. It's a significant exclusion that would hurt anyone deeply. Your reaction is completely proportionate to the injury. Something loosened in my chest at her words. For so long, I had been trained to doubt my own emotional responses, to accept that my hurt feelings were an overreaction or a misunderstanding. What do I do now? I asked. That depends on what you want from these relationships moving forward, she replied. But before you can decide that, you need to establish clear boundaries to protect yourself from further harm. We spent the remainder of the session discussing what healthy boundaries might look like in my situation. By the time I left her office, I had the beginnings of a plan. That evening, I reached out to a local support group for adults dealing with difficult family dynamics. Their weekly meetings became a sanctuary where I could speak openly about my experiences without fear of being told I was too sensitive or making too much of things. In one particularly impactful session, a group member named Rachel shared how she had stopped financing her parents' lifestyle after years of emotional manipulation. The money was the last string they could pull, she explained. Once I cut that, I finally had the space to heal. Her words resonated deeply. The renovation payments were indeed the last tangible connection I had with my family, one they clearly valued more than my presence or feelings. 2 weeks after the wedding debacle, I consulted with a financial advisor about the legal implications of withdrawing my verbal commitment to the remaining renovation funds. She confirmed what I suspected. A verbal agreement about a gift was not legally binding. You have no obligation to continue these payments, she assured me. Financially speaking, this is entirely your decision. With that knowledge, I took the final step in my plan. I called the renovation company directly and explained that I would no longer be contributing to the project. The contractor sounded unsurprised, mentioning that payments had been irregular and that he had already been considering pausing the work until financing was clarified. I'll need to inform your parents, he said. They should expect a call from me tomorrow. I understand, I replied, a strange calm settling over me. Thank you for letting me know. That night, I wrote in my journal for the first time since college, pouring out the complex emotions I was processing. Anger at the deliberate exclusion. Grief for the family relationship I had always wanted but never truly had. Fear about what would happen when they discovered I had withdrawn financial support. But beneath it all, something new and fragile was growing. Self-respect. For 32 years, I had accepted less than I deserved. I had made excuses for hurtful behavior, doubted my own perceptions, and continued giving to people who consistently failed to reciprocate. This pattern hadn't developed overnight, and it wouldn't be resolved quickly either. But in withdrawing the renovation funds, I was taking a concrete step toward valuing myself in a way my family never had. The next morning, I attended my second session with Dr. Foster. We discussed the decision I had made and prepared for the likely fallout. They will probably try to make you feel guilty, she cautioned. They may accuse you of being vindictive or petty. Are you prepared for that? I considered her question carefully. I think so, I said finally. For the first time, I'm clear about what happened and why my response is justified. I'm not doing this to hurt them. I'm doing it because continuing to financially support people who didn't care enough to include me in a major family event would be an act of self-harm. Dr. Foster nodded approvingly. That's a powerful realization. Hold on to it in the difficult conversations to come. As I left her office, my phone buzzed with a text from my mother. Contractor called. Says you've withdrawn funding for the renovation. Please call ASAP. It was the first contact from any family member in over 2 weeks. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I went in my favorite coffee shop, ordered a cappuccino, and sat by the window watching people pass by. Each person with their own complex family story, their own struggles and triumphs. I was not alone in having to establish boundaries with loved ones who had caused harm. When I finally felt centered enough, I composed a brief reply. I'm available to discuss this tomorrow at 7 p.m. Eastern. I'll call you then. Setting the date and time was itself an act of reclaiming power. For once, this conversation would happen on my terms. When I was fully prepared, not in a reactive moment of vulnerability. That night, I slept more soundly than I had since discovering the wedding betrayal. Whatever happened next, I had taken the first step toward healing by honoring my own worth. Exactly 1 month after Jason's wedding, at precisely 7 in the evening, I called my parents home. My hand was steady as I dialed, a small detail that felt significant given the magnitude of the conversation ahead. They answered on the first ring, the speakerphone amplifying both their voices. Megan, finally, my mother's voice carried a mixture of relief and irritation. We've been trying to reach you for days. This wasn't true. After the initial text about the contractor, there had been exactly 2 missed calls, both without voicemails. I told you when I would call, I replied evenly. I'm calling now as promised. Well, we have a serious situation here. My father cut in. The contractor has completely stopped work on the kitchen and bathroom. Says he won't continue until financing is confirmed. I'm aware, I said. I spoke with him directly before he called you. A momentary silence followed this revelation. You had no right to do that, my mother finally said, her voice tight. We had an agreement about the renovation payments. Just like we had an agreement that I would be a bridesmaid in Jason's wedding? The words came out calmer than I expected. Another silence. Longer this time. Is that what this is about? My father's tone was dismissive. You're punishing us financially because you missed the wedding? I didn't miss the wedding, I corrected him. I was excluded from it. There's a difference. We told you the date changed, my mother insisted. No, you didn't. Not clearly. Not directly. Not in any way that ensured I knew about such a significant change. This is childish, Megan, my father sighed. Withholding money for home repairs because your feelings are hurt. I took a deep breath, centering myself as Dr. Foster had taught me. This isn't about punishment. It's about recognizing that our relationship has been unbalanced for a long time. I've consistently given more than I've received, emotionally and now financially. That's not fair, my mother protested. We've always loved you. I believe you love me in your way. I acknowledged. But you've never valued me equally. The wedding is just the clearest example of a lifelong pattern. Before they could respond, my call waiting beeped. Jason was calling. I need to put you on hold for a moment, I told my parents, then switched to Jason's call. Megan, what the hell? He skipped any greeting. Mom and Dad just called me freaking out about the renovation money. What are you doing? Hello to you too, Jason. Congratulations on your wedding. I heard it was lovely. His momentary confusion was audible in the silence. Thanks, he said finally. Look, I know you're upset about missing it, but this isn't the way to handle things. I didn't miss your wedding. Jason. I was deliberately not informed of the date change in any clear way. That's not true. I called you several times. And did you ever leave a voicemail specifically saying, the wedding has been moved to June 8th instead of June 15th? I don't remember exactly what I said, he hedged. That's convenient. Because I've checked every voicemail, text, and email. Not once did anyone clearly communicate this critical information. You should have checked the wedding website, he argued. Everyone else did. No one told me I needed to check the website for a date change. A complete date change, Jason. Not a time adjustment or venue update, but moving the entire event up by a week. He sighed heavily. Look, what's done is done. But punishing mom and dad financially isn't going to change anything. This isn't punishment, I explained for the second time that evening. It's a boundary. I'm no longer willing to contribute financially to people who didn't consider me important enough to include in a major family event. That's not fair. They didn't exclude you on purpose. Didn't they? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like a collective decision was made that my presence wasn't essential. No one called to ask why I hadn't confirmed the new date. No one seemed concerned when I didn't show up for the rehearsal dinner. Not one person called on the morning of your wedding to ask where I was. His silence told me I'd hit a nerve. Jason, do you know how it felt to walk into that house, excited to be part of your special day, only to be shown photos of an event I should have been in? To realize everyone I love celebrated without me and then tried to convince me it was my own fault. I didn't think of it that way, he admitted quietly. That's the problem. None of you thought about how this would affect me, because none of you truly prioritized my feelings or my place in the family. I heard him exhale slowly. What do you want, Megan? An apology? I want acknowledgement of what actually happened. Not gaslighting, not excuses. Just honest recognition that I was wronged. And then you'll pay for the renovations? His question confirmed everything. This conversation isn't about the money, Jason. But thank you for making it crystal clear where the family's priorities lie. I ended his call and returned to my parents, who immediately began speaking over each other. Did you just hang up on your brother? Megan, this is getting out of hand. I'm still here, I said firmly. And I'm willing to have a real conversation about what happened and where we go from here. But not if you continue to dismiss my feelings or try to make me doubt my own experience. Fine, my father's exasperation was evident. We're sorry you missed the wedding. We should have called more persistently about the date change. Now can we please resolve this renovation issue? That's not an acknowledgement, I pointed out. That's placating me to get what you want. What do you want us to say? My mother sounded genuinely confused. That we deliberately excluded you? That's not true. I want you to recognize that whether it was deliberate or negligent, the outcome was the same. I was excluded from one of the most important family events of our lives. And instead of anyone showing genuine remorse, you all tried to convince me it was my fault for being too busy or not paying attention. We didn't mean to hurt you, my father said, his tone softening slightly. Intent isn't the point. Impact is. And the impact was devastating. A long silence followed. I could almost hear them exchanging glances across their living room. We're sorry, my mother finally said, her voice different now, less defensive. Truly sorry for how this affected you. You're right that we should have made absolutely certain you knew about the date change. It wasn't a complete acknowledgement, but it was the first genuine apology I'd received. Thank you, I said. That means something to me. So about the renovation, my father began, but I interrupted him. I'm not continuing the payments, I stated clearly. That decision isn't punishment. It's a boundary I'm establishing. I need to prioritize my own financial security and well-being. But we're counting on that money, my mother protested. We've already ordered materials. I understand that's difficult. But I've contributed $20,000 already, far more than I initially agreed to. The remaining costs need to come from another source. This feels vindictive, my father muttered. I can understand why it might seem that way to you, I conceded. But from my perspective, Continuing to deplete my savings for people who have consistently shown they don't value my presence or feelings would be self-destructive. Of course we value you, my mother insisted. Your actions tell a different story, I replied gently. And I need to start believing actions over words. The conversation continued for another hour, cycling through guilt trips, accusations, moments of genuine connection, and eventually, reluctant acceptance. By the end, we had reached an uneasy truce. They acknowledged, at least partially, that the wedding situation had been handled poorly. I maintained my boundary about the renovation funds. As we prepared to end the call, my mother asked in a small voice, "Will we see you at Thanksgiving?" The question caught me off guard. Thanksgiving was months away. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. I need time to process everything and decide what kind of relationship I want moving forward. "We're still your family," my father reminded me. Yes, I agreed. But being family doesn't mean accepting hurtful treatment. I need to figure out what healthy family relationships look like for me now. After hanging up, I sat in my quiet apartment. Emotionally drained but strangely peaceful. For the first time in my life, I had stood firm in my own truth, refusing to be gaslit or manipulated into doubting my perceptions. It wasn't a perfect resolution. They hadn't fully acknowledged the pattern of inequality that had defined our family dynamic for decades. But it was a beginning. A crack in the facade that might eventually lead to genuine understanding. More importantly, I had changed. In standing up for myself. In refusing to continue funding renovations without reciprocal respect, I had shifted something fundamental in our family system. I was no longer the accommodating daughter who would accept whatever scraps of regard they offered. I had declared my worth and in doing so, had begun to truly believe in it myself. 6 months after the wedding incident, autumn painted Boston in vibrant reds and golds. My life had transformed in ways both subtle and profound. The most visible change was professional. 2 months after establishing boundaries with my family, I was offered a director position at a competing agency, a role that came with a significant salary increase and greater creative control. I accepted immediately, recognizing that part of my healing journey involved investing in my own success rather than constantly supporting others. My new office had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Charles River, a daily reminder of how far I had come. Less visible, but equally important, were the changes in my personal life. Weekly therapy sessions with Dr. Foster had evolved from crisis management to deeper exploration of patterns and growth. I had joined a hiking group that met every Saturday. Finding unexpected joy in physical challenges and new friendships formed on woodland trails. Most significantly, I had cultivated what Dr. Foster called a chosen family. A network of friends who demonstrated through consistent actions that they valued my presence in their lives. Amber remained my closest confidant. But my circle had expanded to include Rachel from the support group, several colleagues from my new workplace, and neighbors in my apartment building with whom I shared weekly dinner rotations. My relationship with my biological family remained complicated. After our confrontational phone call, communication had been sparse for several weeks. My parents eventually hired a different contractor and scaled back their renovation plans to match their budget. Jason and Rebecca sent a generic Christmas card with no personal note. Slowly, tentatively, small points of contact re-emerged. My mother began sending occasional texts, simple messages about the weather or a TV show she thought I might enjoy. My father, never one for digital communication, surprised me by mailing a birthday card containing a brief handwritten note, "Thinking of you. Hope you're well." Jason was the first to attempt a more meaningful reconnection. 3 months after our heated exchange, he called on a Sunday afternoon. "Megan," he began awkwardly. "I've been doing some thinking about the wedding and everything that happened after." I waited silently, giving him space to continue. "You were right," he admitted finally. "We did exclude you. Not in a deliberate, malicious way, but through a series of small decisions and assumptions that added up to something really hurtful." His acknowledgement, though belated, washed over me like cool water. "Thank you for saying that, Jason. It means a lot. Rebecca and I have been talking about it too. She feels terrible. We both do." He paused. I never realized how often our family has treated you as less important. Not until you pointed it out, and then I started noticing patterns everywhere. This revelation stunned me. You did? Yeah. Like how mom calls me twice a week, but only calls you when she needs something. Or how dad brags about my job to his friends, but never mentions your accomplishments. Once I started paying attention, it was impossible to unsee. We talked for over an hour that day, the most honest conversation we'd ever had as siblings. Jason shared his own insecurities, including his fear that he didn't deserve the preferential treatment he'd always received. I described the pain of constantly trying to earn love that should have been freely given. I want to do better, he said before we hung up. I can't change mom and dad, but I can change how I show up as your brother. His words weren't just empty promises. In the months that followed, Jason demonstrated through consistent actions that he was committed to rebuilding our relationship on more equal footing. He began calling regularly, not just when he needed something. He sent thoughtful birthday and Christmas gifts, a stark contrast to the last-minute gift cards of previous years. Most touchingly, he framed a childhood photo of the two of us and sent it with a note that read, "To my sister, who deserved better. I'm trying now." My parents' evolution was slower and less dramatic. After 5 months of minimal contact, my mother called with a hesitant invitation to join them for a weekend at their home. Just to spend time together, she clarified. No agenda, no expectations. After discussing it with Dr. Foster, I decided to accept with clear boundaries in place. I would stay at a nearby hotel rather than in my childhood bedroom. I would limit the visit to 2 days rather than the suggested 3. And I would be prepared to leave if old patterns reemerged. That weekend was uncomfortable at times, with moments of strained silence and awkward attempts at connection. But there were also glimpses of possibility. My father asked detailed questions about my new job, listening attentively to my answers. My mother showed me her garden without once mentioning Jason or comparing our achievements. The most significant moment came on Sunday morning over coffee, when my mother suddenly said, "I don't think I've ever really seen you, Megan." Not fully. The simple acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. "I'd like to try now," she continued, reaching tentatively for my hand. "If you'll let me." This wasn't a magical resolution, a Hollywood ending where all past hurts were instantly healed. It was messy and incomplete, the beginning of a process that would require consistent effort from all of us. But it was genuine, and for the first time, I felt hopeful that real change was possible. In the months that followed, we began the slow work of family therapy, meeting twice monthly with a specialist in family systems. Progress was nonlinear, with breakthroughs followed by setbacks, old patterns reasserting themselves alongside new understanding. But slowly, incrementally, we began building healthier relationships. The most profound changes, however, were within me. I had learned to value myself independently of external validation. I had discovered that establishing boundaries wasn't selfish but necessary for authentic relationships. Most importantly, I had realized that while family connections are important, they cannot come at the expense of self-respect and personal well-being. On a crisp October day, exactly 1 year after Jason's wedding, I sat on a bench overlooking the Charles River, reflecting on everything that had transpired. The pain of exclusion had transformed into something unexpected, gratitude for the awakening it had prompted. Without that devastating moment in my parents' living room, I might have continued indefinitely in unhealthy patterns, giving endlessly without receiving in return. The betrayal had forced me to confront not just how my family treated me, but how I allowed myself to be treated. In standing up for my worth, in refusing to finance renovations without reciprocal respect, I had changed the dynamic permanently. Whether or not my family fully embraced this new reality, I had embraced it for myself. Life continues to unfold in complex ways. Some days, my family reverts to old habits. Some days, I catch myself falling into familiar patterns of seeking approval. But the difference now is awareness. We recognize when we're sliding backward and have tools to redirect ourselves toward healthier interactions. The greatest lesson I've learned through this journey is that true family, whether biological or chosen, is built on mutual respect and reciprocal care. Love without these elements is incomplete at best and destructive at worst. By establishing clear boundaries and requiring that my worth be recognized through actions, not just words, I created space for authentic relationships to develop, both within my biological family and beyond it. If you're watching this and recognizing similar patterns in your own family dynamics, remember that standing up for your worth isn't selfish or petty. It's essential for your well-being and, ultimately, for the health of your relationships. The path isn't easy, and resolution isn't guaranteed. But the journey towards self-respect and authentic connection is always worthwhile. Have you ever had to establish difficult boundaries with loved ones? How did it change your relationship? Share your experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more journeys of personal growth and healing. Remember, you deserve relationships that honor your worth. And sometimes the most loving thing you can do, both for yourself and others, is to firmly say, "This is what I need to be truly present in this relationship." Thank you for listening to my story.